现在我们要去河南省人民检察院，为我们18号要录制的《侠肝义胆》丁瑜特别访问的节目做一个前期的采访。
Ding Yu is a journalist and TV presenter.
我喜欢记者这份工作。
I like being a reporter. I really love my job.
其实我觉得它已经不仅仅是我。去谋生啊。
After so many years, I feel it's more than a job to
简
me.
单的一份工作，一份职业而已。
But the program she presents is extraordinary.
校长，错了，对不起你。
所有的人都应该恨你。
对。
She conducts interviews with prisoners who've been sentenced to death. In the weeks, days, or even minutes before an execution is carried out, the condemned talk to Ding Yu face to face.
简单一些就是收入，还有性问题。
唤醒人性回归，感悟生命可贵。观众朋友您好，欢迎收看这一期的灵性会见，我是丁瑜。
Ding Yu and her team are making last-minute preparations for today's interview.
他那么多人，他都能把他媳妇儿给都捅死了。
不都说了，当时觉得可不理解
啊，5、6个人呢。
啥情况吗？那个丁爱国。
In China, you can be sentenced to death for 55 crimes, ranging from theft, smuggling, and crimes against the state to violent crimes like murder. Ding Yu focuses exclusively on clear-cut cases of murder, often unusually brutal killings.
把他那个刀从后背，从前面穿衣的后背又拔出来，拿着刀往外跑，吓得很狰狞。
Interviews before execution is on every week of the year. It's been running for more than 4 years. Ding Yu has presented every one.
是不是那个紫色的比较好？因为今天穿的是紫色的，好不好？
The show is broadcast on the Henan Legal Channel, one of 3,000 TV channels across China. All are owned by the state and are subject to its censors.
"唤醒人性回归，感悟生命可贵。观众朋友您好，欢迎收看《灵行会见》，我是丁瑜。
To Western eyes, the show may seem exploitative, but that's not how Ding Yu sees it.
只是听说，那么这样的观众，他可能
Some viewers may consider it cruel to ask a criminal to do an interview when they're about to be executed.
已经糟糕到这种程度，还要来接受你的采访。
On the contrary, they want to be heard.
相反，每个人其实都需要出口，每个人都有倾诉的欲望。啊，那个灯太高了。
Ding Yu is about to interview a man who stabbed his ex-wife to death before setting fire to the house.
而我和被告人在采访的这样一个
When I talk with the interviewee, I'm more concerned with his character,
成长、
upbringing,
他的
environment, social background, and the link between him and the victim.
他们的交叉点，
That is what we want to dig out.
是我们所要深刻挖掘的。
Gao Pingfu was badly burnt in the blaze and has been sentenced to death.
把他的衣服把它整好，外边这个马甲的衣襟给他，哎，对，哎，对。
We have a saying, feed him a carrot, so he'll follow you. Everyone has their weak points, something they care about.
喜欢看什么录像啊？老去录像厅。
录像厅，还是都是哎呀，都是武侠的吧，科幻的。
So we don't start by talking about the case with him, but things he might be interested in. We have to really understand this person.
而当时，你认为 你发现他跟原来他和丁爱国在一起居住，你当时是个什么心情？
当时有点气愤嘛，我就说了，离开他，我也活不了。
你为什么说离开他你活不了呢？
因为他是我生命的一部分。
为什么？
我一生都找他的一个。
Gao Pingfu turned up at his ex-wife's home with a knife and stabbed her to death in front of her parents.
我不知道咋回事，我爹死的时候我都没哭过，可是我伤了王淑清，我要哭了。
当时吗？当时吗？
啊，我伤了他，我就在他身上趴在身上哭了。
你认为这就是爱吗？
我也不知道，我伤害他，我本来不想伤害他，我谁也不想伤害他，结果伤害了他。
那么我在面对这一切的时候，说实话，内心
When I'm face to face with them, I feel sorry and regretful for them.
因为他
But I don't sympathize with them, for they should pay a heavy price for their
更
wrongdoing.
多的是
They deserve it.
慨叹和惋惜。你说一开始的时候都是说想给孩子一个完整的家，直到作案那一天还不想伤害女儿，但是现在恰恰受到最大伤害的，在心灵上。你有什么话给你女儿说吗？你可以告诉她，我们可以转达她。你也可以对着镜头告诉她，让她可以看到。
高山，爸爸对不起你。爸爸叫你在一天失去了母爱和父爱，爸爸确实对不起你，也对不起你死去的妈。
他们某一个人、某一方，他的
Their life experience is nothing unusual,
可能是更多
and they have experienced something that most ordinary people are going through or will go through.
那么唯一不同的是
The only difference is the dramatic change they undergo at the moment when they commit the crime.
转折和改变。那么为了不让
The intention of our program is to prevent people from repeating their mistakes.
这就是我们认为的所产生的这种教育意义。
A few weeks later, Ding Yu and her team tracked down Gao Pingfu's daughter, living with her new family.
一个人争得了现在照顾他生活的他的机
We
会。
first asked for the consent of the girl's stepfather, and then we said to the girl,
问他你的
Your dad has something to say to you, and we have filmed it. Would you like to see
想
it?
见他吗？想看到他吗？
She said yes. We just showed the back of her head.
只给了一个背影。
对不起，你爸爸不要活了40多年，希望你好好学习。
而我能够
I can help them convey their last words, or I can help carry out something he wants to do to atone for his crime. Through my interview, he can show his atonement for the crime and get rid of a heavy burden or a stone in his heart.
一块石头。
Days later, the program goes on air.
就是想离不开他。
临行会见为您讲述一个孤独男人曲折离奇的离婚风波。临行会见之离婚风波，马上播出。
唤醒人性回归，感悟生命可贵。观众朋友您好，欢迎收看这期的临行会见，我是丁瑜。
The Chinese state doesn't release official statistics, but it is thought to execute thousands of people every year. They are killed by lethal injection or by firing squad. There is no presumption of innocence in Chinese law, and confessions are sometimes taken before the suspect has had access to a lawyer. Henan TV's stated purpose is to inform and educate according to government policy. It's the show's weekly meeting.
我们要考虑他的表现形式，有的可以直接问他，有的是需要他的同事谁上来说的，有些是需要向所有观众提问题。
It was Ding Yu who came up with the idea for interviews before execution. She pitched it to the boss of the channel.
我觉得这是一个很好的创意。
I thought it was a great idea right away. Not because I thought of it as being commercially successful, but for our responsibility to society.
对社会的这个效益，从这个角度来考虑的。
But they still had to persuade government officials and the courts that the show was in the national interest.
When we were planning this program, we had to have the consent and approval of the High Court of Henan Province. Without them, we wouldn't have been able to do it.
In China, judges are appointed by the state's National People's Congress. Judge Liu Wenling was one of the first to offer cases to the program.
When Ding Yu came to me and asked whether I could offer her a good case for interviews before execution, I remembered this one case. The reason I chose it is because of its educational value. That is, when young people in love are dealing with romantic disputes, they should not lose control like the defendant.
As a warning to others, the Chinese authorities have traditionally paraded prisoners through the streets before execution. Now they use a TV show. The message they want to send is that you must abide by the law and you must never lose control.
我们的观众他就从这里头能够。
We want the audience to be warned. For us, if people are warned, then some tragedies might be averted. That's good for society.
那么对社会来说，显然是有益的。
感悟生命可贵，观众朋友您好，欢迎收看这一期的《灵行会见》。
Interviews Before Execution rates in the top 10 shows in the province and is watched by millions every week. It has made Ding Yu a star.
并且观众比较喜爱他，这个。
The audience like her, and so do the interviewees.
就是大家。
That means criminals hated by the public.
痛恶的这个罪犯，那么。
And she is a lady.
是，我觉得。
I assumed her female image would be helpful to the production.
这个有助于这个节目的制作。
We say she is the beauty with the beast.
形象的比喻为是天使和野兽的对话。
In a break from filming, Ding Yu goes shopping with her husband and her son. But even here, work catches up with her.
刚才小姑娘认出我了，我说你认识我吗？那么小都看我的节目。
Over 100 million people live in Henan province. Vast cities are surrounded by enormous rural areas. Justice in China can be swift. Once the Supreme Court has upheld a death sentence, the prisoner can be executed after 7 days. Executions take place near to where the prisoners are being held, in open spaces, closed off from the public, or in mobile execution trucks. As the province is so large, Ding Yu often travels hundreds of miles for an interview at short notice.
因为时间有时候特别紧张，然后到现场以后，我们还要做很多布置，所以往往现在都已经学会在车上化妆。今天这起案件，是一个死刑案件，一个26岁，一个27岁。
The young man she'll interview today is convicted of murdering his girlfriend's grandparents. His girlfriend knew about the plan to rob them and is facing 12 years in jail, and the boy who killed them has been sentenced to death.
Both defendants are university students. They're very young, in their 20s.
3号审判庭，桌子一抬，两边桌子一撤就行了。
那提好架来
着。好架，没问题，没问题。这个桌子稍微往后弄点就行了。这个桌子也可以往后。
Like many of the cases Ding Yu covers, this one is about money.
来，这边坐。
The robbery went wrong, and Zhang Peng ended up murdering the elderly couple.
坐正吧。
我在那个翻柜子的时候把他扔了进去。
哎呀，那他外公呢？他姥爷不是已经睡着了吗？
睡着就在我们争吵的时候、争打的时候，他已经醒了，已经坐起来了。
就捅了过去了。因为自己的女儿，你想想，他的母亲的亲生父母被活活的害死。
现在一口。
有什么话给崔婷婷说，我一会儿告诉她。
只想对崔婷婷说，请他以后要坚强的过下去，希望不要再遇到我这样。
Ding Yu passed on Zhang Peng's message to his girlfriend, who's also in jail for being an accomplice to the robbery.
以我的判断呢，我觉得这个
To me, it seems that the girl still loves this boy, even though he killed her grandparents.
对这个男孩还是有感情。
Her eyes were wet with tears.
就是眼睛。现在怎么来看待张鹏？
这是我最不能原谅的呀。
你现在恨他吗？
想起家人的时候，想起家里所承受这些的时候，有时候也挺恨的。恨也没用的，已经现在到了这个地步，他被判了死刑。
我采访过。
I've interviewed criminals even younger than him. Some are just 18 years old. That's the minimum age you can be sentenced to death.
如果一旦犯罪，可以被判处死刑的这样的年轻人，啊，我的头啊！然后我也
They're gone now.
知道
Executed.
已经离开了。
They have left their families forever.
他已经被执行死刑，离开了这个他的亲人。
They're so young. They never had the chance to see this world, or to enjoy life, career, work, and love of family. They've made the wrong choice, and the price is their lives.
The show airs only a week after the interview, so Ding Yu and the editor are under intense pressure to get it ready for transmission.
好，想起什么，然后拿那盘带子，我看听到最后那个接的，看能接上去。
小郑在默不语，后来他在听我问他，他不管回答与否是沉默也好，有一个他的反打镜头，然后你刷一下一个特技，然后再回到庭审现场。你这是什么？我问他了，我问的谁呀？谁的什么反应？他回答了吗？没有结果告诉观众，你就直接又转到庭审现场了。啊，这肯定不行，明白吗？这得交代清楚。
凌晨大火引出一桩杀人惨案。案发之夜是什么引爆了绝望与疯狂？
当时脑子非常冲动，就顺手就把刀拿出来。
这是如果说这个节目对我负面影响
I can say this program has a really serious effect on me.
非常严重的一个方面。其实，在刚刚
When I started the show, I was often so scared about others, about people around me, afraid they might kill me.
Home is the only place she can really switch off and relax.
做一些，尤其是要做一些儿子爱吃的，那么心里肯定是很放松、很高兴的。 如果是做出来儿子再喜欢，就会更高兴。但是有时候儿子会说：“妈，还没有我们学校做的好吃呢。”就会有点受挫。那我压的稍微薄一点。好嘞，老公。 吃饭。
应该搬几个椅子。
来，如果在外面。
All the anxiety and pressures from my work are lifted as soon as I come home to my family.
只要一走进这个家门，就会觉得，它自然而然就会减轻了许多。
I know I'll keep on doing many interviews, but at the same time, lots of people keep telling me, don't do this program for long. Even the High Court Chief himself personally suggested that I should not do this program for long. He said as a girl, he called me a girl, even though I was not a girl anymore. He said doing this would burden you too much and won't do your life any good.
Although she's presented the show for 4 years, Ding Yu admits to crying on only 2 occasions during an interview. Once was with a man sentenced to death for the murder of a child. It was a kidnap for ransom that went horribly wrong.
我不得不问你们一句：如果自己的骨肉被人这样，你们做父母的会怎么想？怎么就能下不了那个手呢？又不是禽兽。
The killer described in detail what they did to the girl. It was too much for Ding Yu to bear.
我采访过很多次刑犯，也见过很多案件。但是我刚才听你描述这些细节的时候，我觉得让我的心里很难承受。为那个无辜的孩子。 这是我从来没有出现过。哎呀，就那样一个少女，所有的人都应该恨你。
对。
Filming a documentary about her show is making Ding Yu relive many of the cases she's filmed throughout the years.
Interviewing so often, I thought I'd get used to the evil. But the questions you've asked me about the cases that have affected me most, oh, they're painful for me. Because telling those stories, recalling them, I've felt anxious since yesterday. It's making me feel awful and giving me headaches.
As Ding Yu's show has gained in popularity, viewers have contacted her to ask her to cover their stories. For one of her most memorable interviews, it was the victim's sister who got in touch.
他就特别想知道，他想通过我去，因为他见不到。
Unable to see Wu Yanyan herself, the sister-in-law really wanted to know how Wu could be so cruel, and how she could have killed her husband. She wanted to draw wider attention to this case because of her hatred of the killer.
能够让社会上对他进行一个谴责。
It is a kind of comfort for the sister.
这也是原因之一，我想。
Ding Yu was to follow the story over many months to an extraordinary conclusion. From the start, it was more complicated than most of Ding Yu's cases. The death sentence was in dispute.
要谈到现在，我仍然没有发现或没有了解到到底是什么直接的原因让你对自己的丈夫下这样的毒手。所以我觉得你无法让所有人满意，你们无法给法律一个回答，你为什么会下这样的毒手？
对我进行了打骂。我当时真的是很生气，真的我当时很生气。
Despite Wu Yanyan's claims, the abuse was never proven.
而他的父母承受了多少痛苦，我想你也应该能想象得到。
When Wu Yanyan's case went to trial, she was sentenced to immediate execution. But since 2007, every execution verdict in China has had to go to the Supreme Court to be confirmed. When they looked at Wu Yanyan's case and the accusations of abuse, they asked for it to be re-examined.
When the crime happened, her daughter was only a baby of 14 months. Now she's soon to be 7. This is torture for a mother like Wu.
In the last 5 years, the government's official policy has been to execute less and more cautiously. Earlier this year, the Chinese state reduced the number of crimes that received the death penalty from 68 to 55. Now, economic crimes like VAT and credit fraud no longer carry the death sentence. But with no published statistics, it's impossible to measure the impact of the changes. There is also now a more lenient line on domestic murder. Judges are expected to consult with the victim's family and try to agree a lesser sentence with them. In Wu Yanyan's case, it's Judge Liu Wenling's job to mediate between the two sides.
Mediations for most criminal cases are very difficult because victims' families are experiencing huge sorrow, and they all have this traditional idea: you killed my family member, you need to be sentenced to death. Although this crime is still a homicide, since it has taken a life and has left severe consequences, it does less harm to society than other cases of kidnap and murder or robbery and murder.
Wu Yanyan's case is one that Ding Yu and her team will continue to follow. If the two families can come to an agreement, then her death sentence could be lifted. Ding Yu's recorded over 200 programs, but it was her interview with a gay man that proved the most controversial. Until 1999, homosexuality was an imprisonable offence in China, and it is still a huge taboo rarely discussed in the media.
叫什么？
我叫丁瑜。
河南电视台丁瑜。
哦，那你为什么要先问我的名字呢？
哎呀，那见了尊敬人嘛，对吧？都是人嘛，是吧？都是人，男的女的都是人嘛，是吧？
是的。
Bao Rongting was convicted of murdering his mother and abusing her dead body.
你杀死妈妈的时候有没有一种积怨？就是说，一个是他反对你和男孩子来往，有没有一种积怨在心里面，然后在这一刻爆发？
简单一些就是收入，还有性问题。
When the interview with Bao Rongting aired, it achieved the highest viewing figures of the series. The channel ran another 3 half-hour episodes on his story.
他自诩为内心像女性般温柔的同性恋者。
说我长得漂亮，有男孩喜欢。
可他又为什么沦为令人切齿的杀人凶手？
这要上几天呢？还是要几？
剖析同性恋者沦为死刑犯的心路历程，关注同一片蓝天下的神秘群体。
从犯罪心理学上来看呢，它是一个畸形犯罪。
临刑会见之错信凶徒，马上播出。
It was the first time Ding Yu had met an openly gay man.
This episode deeply affected many viewers, and it was a great challenge for me to face him. I really couldn't accept some of his practices, words and deeds. Though he was a man, he asked me in a very feminine tone, "Do you feel awkward speaking to me?" Actually, I did feel awkward.
你感觉舒服吗？感觉难受还是舒服吗？
But I couldn't say I felt awkward. I could only say, no, not awkward. Because a gay man always hopes others will approve and understand. If I showed any sign of disapproval, he'd raise a wall. He'd refuse my interview and never disclose his inner feelings.
58年我大姐。
The law in China stipulates prisoners can be executed just 7 days after their final sentence. But some remain in prison awaiting execution for much longer. A month after Ding Yu interviewed Bao Rongting, she has returned to the prison on the day of his execution. While there, they filmed 2 other men being led out to say goodbye to their families in the prison courtyard. It wasn't until 2006 prisoners in Henan were allowed to see their families before their execution.
但是内心是想见亲人的，是吧？
到以后见家里面，该讲这个从你身上吸取教训。报道，还没有啥交代，没有啥说没有。珍惜这个机会，珍惜这个机会。
你放心吧，我哪怕会照顾好。你妈，那孩子都有人照顾的啊。可是，哎呀，你们想的嘛，好难幸福啊。你妈往后都有人照顾的，你放心走吧啊，不要再操心了。
你还有啥说？
现在你妈，你姐都在那照顾着你妈，几乎都没叫你妈知道。你妈血压高啊。
The next prisoner is brought out to say goodbye to his family.
以后安排回家见面，有啥说的看有话好不好？你按不管的事讲，领导这一关好不好？还有看看谁来，一会儿看师傅你看还有着急。
你在这之前有没有想过自己在临行前还能见家人，还能见上最后一面？
是。好。
这个走啊，对不起。
你按起走吧。
好，行，有了。
你按起走吧。
这是你什么？你
他大。哎，他大。
哎，没到。你说还有啥讲的没有？你就这。
看看，我说你那香放哪？啊？你那香都放哪？
香在洛阳。
冷呢？
住这边呢。
在不在？你说不在吗？
在哪呢？
在那子。啊。
俺媳不是大，不是我都，不是你，其实是我都大人没有对你尽好责任，你犯这个俺媳做啊，大哥给你交代，知不知道？
走吧。
我在看我。
来，其他人往外走啊。走吧。
Ding Yu and her team are the only people who have turned up to see Bao Rongting before his execution.
He asked me, where will I go? Will I go to heaven? He knew his life would soon end.
这要去哪里？这要上西天呢，还是要去？
I said, sorry, I went to your home yesterday, but your brother didn't want to see you off. He said, it doesn't matter, it's my fault anyway.
你对家里有什么要说的没有？有没有遗言？
谁呀？家里谁？
家里没人了，是不是？没有什么要说的。
什么？
对家里其他有没有信？有没有遗言要说的？
说什么呀？死了说什么呀？
好，来签字吧。
好多人用这个词来形容。
People talk about angels and devils. I never thought of myself as an angel because I meet these people for work.
因为我去接触这些人是我的工作需要。我把我自己
I see myself more as a witness.
见证
I witness how they've arrived at the point of death. witness their mindset before death, and witness the transition from life to death.
从生到死的过程。
签你的名字。
In China, the condemned must provide signatures and fingerprints to confirm their identity and state that they don't want to take up their right to further appeal. By signing the paperwork, he clears the last hurdle for his own execution.
好，刚才这个纪院长给大家提了很多要求啊，我问大家一声，同志们能不能做到？能。好，检查装备，是吧？遇到有难缠了、脾气暴躁了、不配合了，就容易出危险。所以说啊，你这个搀扶手啊，任务特别重，特别是你没有干过的这些个，是吧？捆绑的要利索，你要注意安全。
好吧，鲍仁廷，我们只能祝你一路走好。谢谢。
As he says goodbye, he has one last request.
我的思想在
I had so many thoughts racing through my head.
各种的决定。
Should I shake hands with
为什么
him?
要跟他握手呢？
What would he gain if I did?
给他些什么呢？我不知道我的握手会
What comfort would this bring?
让他能够安心地
Would it help him go peacefully?
最后
At last, I moved my middle finger across his hand.
就这样划过了一下。
There was a lot of dirt under his
我的
nails.
手很脏，黑黑的，指甲里面都是污垢，就这样划了一下。
It was like that.
很久我都觉得我这个指甲
For a long time, there was a feeling in this finger.
都有一种感觉。
I can't describe that feeling. I don't know whether I should have shaken hands with him or not.
不应该跟他握手，我到现在我都
That was just my instinctive reaction.
反应。而且我记录了他的画面。
I remember his look.
上行车之前
He turned to look around.
寻找他的眼神，转过脸来
I think he was looking for his relatives,
来寻找他的亲人。但是他
but his relatives didn't show up,
还能看到
not while he was still alive.
在他被执行死刑后，他的家人
After he was executed, his family members went to collect his body.
是领遗体，领尸体。
Bao Rongting was then loaded into an open-top truck, wearing a placard bearing his name and his crime, and he was paraded around the streets on the way to his execution. This practice is no longer legal in China, but there are many differences in the way the law is implemented across the country. Ding Yu's program never shows the actual execution. The constant proximity to death haunts her.
About this time last year, I was on a train to Fujian. It was about 1 a.m. I wasn't feeling well and couldn't sleep. Everyone else was asleep.
The
curtains were closed. And the moment I opened them, it seemed outside in the blurry night, in the wilderness, stood a long row of people. All those I've interviewed who'd been executed. Their faces were so real, and now all of them standing there looking at me. I was horrified. I couldn't have imagined anything like that. I don't know why. Actually, I know so many stories, met so many people, heard so many cases, learned about so many hard realities. How can I put it? It's really not good for me at all. I have too much rubbish in my heart.
Dingyu is at Zhengzhou Detention Center. They're about to film an interview that has taken weeks to set up.
那么我们在这个拍摄之前，可能要做一些。
We have to do some research before shooting. Interview the victim's family and ask for background information.
一些情况，然后再到被告方。
And then we'll contact the families of the defendants. Sometimes we would contact their neighbors or witnesses at the crime scene.
群众中间去了解一些这个情况。
There are tricks to get cases from the criminal court and permission from the propaganda department, letting them understand the case is educational and typical.
典型性的，抱养的，你看刚大学毕业，真挺可惜的，飞来横祸。考研他都已经结婚了，当时说的时候，可能刚从号里。
However, after initially agreeing, the man refuses to do the interview.
他什么都说不出来。
您还说了这
不是他智力有问题，我估计情况，他
智力有问题啊，还是
拍这个案子确实比较困难啊。
这2年那个。
Making this program is difficult. We can't interview subjects without getting their consent. People rarely refuse our interview. Until now.
According to Henan TV, only 5 prisoners have ever refused out of more than 200 Dingyu has interviewed. In Chinese law, they now recognize a concept called social harmony. In the case of a domestic murder, if the victim's family can forgive the murderer and an agreement can be reached by the 2 sides, then the death penalty can be lifted. The judges have persuaded the families of Wu Yanyan and her murdered husband to meet.
The victim's family strongly demanded the death penalty. But it is not encouraged by the current criminal justice policy. So the judge needed to do a lot of mediation. Only by doing so could Wu Yanyan's life be saved.
According to the regulations of criminal law, we need to provide an opportunity for mediation to both sides. The victim's family strongly hoped that Wu would be sentenced to death, but I still talked with them from the perspective of this girl.
Wu Yanyan's husband's family are determined she should be executed. But this is her parents' chance to convince them to show forgiveness. In reality, it often just comes down to money and how much one family will pay to another to compensate for their loss. Later, Dingyu plays Wu Yanyan the video of her family's pleas.
Later, 就双方的老人手拉着手在一起。终于达到这样一个局面，法官也很高兴，我们每个人也都很高兴。也许在大家这样的努力下，法律会给你一次机会。
Wu Yanyan is back in court awaiting the judge's final verdict.
跟你的时候，跟你期间，你对王玉是否履行了作为一个继母的这个责任和义务？
In Chinese courts, there is no jury, and the judge's decisions are made by majority. The trial is open to all parties to express their views. Even members of the local community can try and influence the judges.
现在宣布休庭，合议庭进行评议，定期宣判，将被告人押回监所。
The distraught parents of Wu Yanyan's husband approach the judges and demand the immediate execution sentence be upheld. Ding Yu and her team will return to film after the final verdict. If her death sentence is lifted, Wu Yanyan will be able to see her daughter again.
I have practiced criminal trials for 29 years, and I know they are the most rigorous trials, because the power to take lives is granted to you by the party, the country, and the people. This power is very great. When I first handled death sentence cases, I felt very heavy if I gave a death sentence. They also had parents, wives, and children. It can be overwhelming for their families, especially for their children. Some are quite young. They don't know what crime their parent committed. All they know is that they'll be executed by firing squad.
Ding Yu is at a home for children orphaned after their parents were sent to jail or executed.
今天刚来的，你好。不客气，真乖。
There are only 6 across China, all funded by private donations.
实际上是一个很伤心的事儿，孩子不愿意提接，而且父母住监狱对孩子来说就是很不光彩，孩子不愿意。
也考虑他们自尊这一块。
对，我们在太阳城来说很慎言孩子父母的问题。
Children as young as 4 months can live here. Some stay for years. Children living in Xinxiang Sun Village are taken to visit their mothers in prison, some of whom are facing the death penalty. The Sun Village aims to take them there at least once or twice a year. As the date of the execution approaches, the children are no longer brought to see their mothers, to reduce the trauma of final separation. Wu Yanyan is held here at Xinxiang Women's Prison, along with 5,000 inmates. The death penalty is still widely used across China, but change does appear to be happening. Fewer crimes now receive a sentence of immediate execution. Wu Yanyan's parents agreed to pay compensation of 100,000 Chinese yuan, or about £10,000, to her husband's family. This is a huge amount of money in China, and almost double the average annual wage. Wu Yanyan has had her death penalty suspended for 2 years. But if she deliberately commits any further crime in prison, she will be executed. At the end of these 2 years, her final sentence will be reviewed, and she could even eventually be freed.
I truly felt released. The two sides are able to finally accept the judgment and reach an agreement because of my efforts. I felt released. Initially, they insisted that Wu has to be sentenced to immediate execution, but now they can forgive her.
Ding Yu has returned to see Wu Yanyan. She's making a follow-up to the original program a year after it was broadcast.
说人家一看着频道，每一个几乎上每礼拜六都看着频道。
当最初被判处死刑立即执行的时候，你那时候心情是什么样子？
我感觉人生彻底绝望，没有一点希望。
那么，接到最终的几次发回重审，然后最终的判决的时候，最后一次裁定的时候，当时的心情是什么样？
当时我感觉心里悬几年石头也终于落地，带完父母吧，去让公公婆子家道歉，让公公婆子不管怎么着，到最终还是原谅我。
Ding Yu had filmed Wu Yanyan's sister-in-law at the time of the trial. She was adamant Wu Yanyan should be executed. She couldn't forgive Wu Yanyan, but nevertheless took her daughter in and brought her up as her own.
给他判死缓，前期时候是就想让他很快就得死，判死刑，一命抵一命。但是，后来情况下，看到孩子的面子上，就是说的跟他讲情，叫我爸我妈。
Although Wang Li and her parents forgave Wu Yanyan, the rest of the family had not.
我领着我的朋友去给他做工，给我妈做工作，包括到现在俺的亲戚、俺姑们、伯们，统统都没人，意思都没人理我，没人理我，意思说这杀人偿命，意思你自己都给这今儿当完了，意思说的，我自己作为一个女人，我就想孩子没有爸了，不能再让他没有妈。
Today, Wang Li has brought Wu Yanyan's daughter to the prison, but the little girl has not been told Wu Yanyan is her mother.
他只是知道我是他亲妈，他那个谁，那是我老公吧，他知道他是他亲爸。我想让孩子看的情况下，主要是第一，给吴艳艳一个安慰，不让他胡想，让他好好一心改造，好好改造。改造好了，就是说嘞，早点出来。我爸我妈他的女儿，我交给他，让他抚养。
你在这里面想了入狱以后最想念的人是谁？你多少年没见过他？
是一个孩子，就我进来，
就那一天，
案发当天，
他把你女儿也带来了。哎呀，你孩子长得真漂亮，可像你。你这几年都没有见过他吧？你知道吗？他的颧骨这儿长得可像你了。
往里那个发判决的时候，往里跟孩子的照片都拿去了。
你经常会？
我经常想孩子的时候就拿出来看。
For years, Wu Yanyan believed she'd be executed and thought she'd never see her daughter again. Ding Yu sits the family down to talk.
还有爷爷家，还有咱爸咱妈，还有恁双方人，还有几个孩子。
孩子，你回去还是年轻。你说等到我再长大，再来重来看你，是吧？来亲一下。
好好学习，王孩，好好学习。
他擦了呗，那不听我话。
我哩。
再见吧，再见吧。好，再见，再见。我们再来这个监狱采访的时候，希望能听到你减刑啊、表现好，希望听到这样的消息。
你放心，我听不出，不会说让你失望。
好，那就好。 最主要是不要让你的家里人，这些原谅你、给你机会的人，别让他们失望。自己表现好就是回报他们了，是吧？讲到孩子怎么想？
孩子很漂亮，看着可聪明
啊，是，就是可聪明、可漂亮。再见，好好改造。
If her good behavior continues, one day Wu Yanyan could even be freed and return home to her daughter.
包括我采访过她之后，我也了解到。
After the interview, I knew how much the opportunity meant to her. She is beginning to understand what she has done and the mistakes she has made. This will enable her to obey the law and be tolerant to others. It's a new start for her.
The makers of Interviews Before Execution believe the show represents the changes taking place in China.
For me, our program can show the world what happens here, so they can see the real China and see China's improvements.
Although China is thought to execute more people than any other country, the death penalty gives one senior member of the judiciary pause for thought.
I've already said that a life could end in the twinkling of an eye after a trial. I'd say this is also very cruel. It's also a means of getting rid of evil deeds through an evil deed. This also touches on the topic we talked about. Should we abolish the death penalty? Since the death sentence for criminals is itself a violent act, then we should abolish it. However, I don't think our country is ready yet for abolishing the death penalty. But in the future, it would be good to abolish it.
Ding Yu doesn't talk of abolition, but whatever the burdens of her job, she sees her mission as keeping people on the right side of the law.
The program urges us to make the right choices when we face every challenge in life, and let us live more rationally and happily, cherish life more and live more thankfully. This is my biggest wish making this program. I hope that one day there will be no prisoners on death row to interview. Then I will be satisfied.
我就满足了。